May 1, 2010. A driver along Ocean Parkway calls in a missing person report. A young woman named Shannon Gilbert had vanished from a client's home in Gilgo Beach. The search for Shannon would take months, but what police found instead would expose something far darker: a killer who'd been operating in plain sight for nearly 2 decades. This is Case Files Explained. Today, how modern forensic techniques finally caught the Gilgo Beach serial killer. For 13 years, families waited. The bodies had been found, but the killer remained a ghost. Then, in 2023, a discarded slice of pizza changed everything. The man investigators arrested wasn't hiding in the shadows. He was a 62-year-old architect from Massapequa. A husband. A father. A neighbor who mowed his lawn every Saturday. His name was Rex Heuermann, and on April 8, 2026, he stood in a Suffolk County courtroom and admitted to murdering 8 women. To understand how this case unfolded, we need to go back to December 2010. Police searching for Shannon Gilbert sent a cadaver dog along Ocean Parkway. The dog hit on something, not Shannon, but the remains of a different woman, wrapped in burlap, buried in the bramble. Then another, and another, and another. Within days, investigators found 4 bodies, all women, all wrapped identically, all within a quarter mile of each other along that desolate stretch of highway. These 4 became known as the Gilgo 4: Maureen Brainard Barnes, Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello. All had worked as escorts. All had disappeared between 2007 and 2010. The search continued. More remains surfaced along Ocean Parkway, some partial, some scattered. At least 10 sets of human remains were eventually recovered from that stretch of shoreline. The investigation consumed years, thousands of tips, hundreds of potential suspects, but the case went cold. No DNA match, no witnesses, no clear pattern to follow. Then, in 2020, everything changed. Suffolk County formed a specialized task force. Fresh eyes, new technology, and a determination to finally answer the question that had haunted Long Island for a decade. The task force started with what they had: cell tower records from 2007 to 2010, every phone that pinged near the dump sites during the windows when victims disappeared. Thousands of phones, then hundreds, then a handful. Investigators cross-referenced with physical descriptions from a witness who'd seen a man with one of the victims before she vanished. One name kept appearing: Rex Heuermann, a licensed architect who owned a consulting firm in Manhattan. He lived just miles from where the bodies were found. But cell tower data alone isn't enough for an arrest. It puts someone in a general area, not at a crime scene. Investigators needed something more, something biological. They found it on a piece of burlap that had been used to wrap one of the victims, a single male hair. It had been preserved in evidence for over a decade, waiting for technology to catch up. DNA from that hair didn't match anyone in criminal databases. But it did reveal something crucial: the killer's genetic profile. Now investigators just needed a sample from their suspect. In January 2023, detectives followed Heuermann during his lunch break in Manhattan. When he finished eating pizza at a restaurant, he threw away his crust. That was the moment. Investigators retrieved that pizza crust from the garbage. DNA extracted from it matched the hair found on the burlap. After 13 years, they had their man. On July 13, 2023, Rex Heuermann was arrested outside his Manhattan office. He was charged with 3 counts of murder, the Gilgo 4-1. More charges would follow. What investigators found when they searched Heuermann's home in Massapequa would disturb even seasoned detectives. Behind the suburban facade was something else entirely. In the basement, they discovered a vault. Inside, 279 weapons, knives, firearms, tools that defied explanation. And something more disturbing, a document investigators called a blueprint. The blueprint was a checklist, handwritten reminders to limit noise, instructions to clean bodies, notes on destroying evidence, a methodical guide to getting away with murder. Heuermann's computer told another story: over 200 searches about the Gilgo Beach investigation. He'd been monitoring his own case for years, tracking what police knew, what they didn't. But the searches went darker. Investigators found he'd compulsively searched for photographs of his victims, their obituaries, their family's social media pages. He'd been watching them grieve. Prosecutors revealed that Heuermann had used burner phones to contact 3 of his victims, Maureen, Melissa, and Megan. He'd lured them with offers of money, then strangled them. His method was consistent: strangulation, then disposal along Ocean Parkway, where the bramble and beach grass concealed the remains. He'd refined his technique over nearly 2 decades. As investigators dug deeper, the timeline expanded. Heuermann's killings hadn't started in 2007. They went back to 1993, more than 30 years of violence hidden behind a respectable career. Additional charges came. Sandra Costilla, killed in 1993. Jessica Taylor and Valerie Mack, both murdered in the early 2000s. Karen Vergata, whose remains had puzzled investigators for years. Some victims had been dismembered, others bound. The burlap wrapping became his signature, a detail that would eventually help link the cases together through fiber analysis. How did he avoid detection for so long? Part of the answer lies in who his victims were: women working in the sex trade. Marginalized, vulnerable. Their disappearances didn't always make headlines, and Heuermann knew how to blend in. He commuted to Manhattan, attended community meetings. His neighbors described him as quiet, unremarkable, the kind of person you'd never look twice at. His wife Asa filed for divorce shortly after his arrest. She'd been living with him for decades. She told investigators she'd had no idea. Whether that's true remains a matter of debate. The case raised uncomfortable questions. Why had it taken so long? Some investigators had flagged Heuermann years earlier, but without DNA evidence, without a clear connection, the case stalled. The 2020 task force succeeded where earlier efforts failed because they had access to tools that didn't exist in 2010. Genetic genealogy databases, advanced cell tower mapping, digital forensics capabilities. The pizza crust DNA technique, collecting genetic material from discarded items, has become a powerful tool for cold case investigators. It's legal and it doesn't require the suspect's cooperation. This same approach helped catch the Golden State Killer in 2018. Investigators uploaded crime scene DNA to genealogy databases, identified distant relatives, then built family trees until they found their suspect. On April 8, 2026, Rex Heuermann stood before Judge Tim Mazzei in Suffolk County Court. He pleaded guilty to 7 counts of murder. He admitted to an 8th killing that hadn't yet been formally charged. In his confession, he described how he'd contacted victims, how he'd killed them, how he'd transported and disposed of their bodies, details only the killer would know. His 8 confirmed victims, Maureen Brainard Barnes, Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waterman, Amber Costello, Jessica Taylor, Valerie Mack, Sandra Costello, Karen Vergata, each a person, each with a life cut short. The family sat in that courtroom. Some had waited more than 30 years for answers. Hearing Heuermann say what he'd done, that was its own kind of torture, but also, for some, a kind of closure. As part of his plea agreement, Heuermann must cooperate with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit. Investigators believe he may have information about other cases. Other victims. The investigation isn't over. Sentencing is scheduled for June 17, 2026. Heuermann faces life in prison without the possibility of parole. But for the families, no sentence can undo what was taken from them. So what can we learn from this case? The first lesson is about the power of persistence. Cold cases aren't always unsolvable. Sometimes they're just waiting for the right technology. DNA technology has transformed criminal investigation. What couldn't be analyzed in 2010 can be decoded today. Evidence that sits in storage for decades may still hold answers. Cell tower analysis has become increasingly precise. Every phone creates a trail, pings that can place a device in a general area at a specific time. Combined with other evidence, it's powerful. Digital forensics revealed Heuermann's obsession with his own case. Criminals who research their crimes online leave traces, browser history, search patterns, metadata, all potential evidence. For families of missing persons, this case offers something important: hope. New investigative techniques continue to emerge. Cases that seem impossible today may be solvable tomorrow. Task forces dedicated to cold cases have made real breakthroughs. If you're following an unsolved case, consider advocating for dedicated investigative resources. Public pressure can make a difference. If you're interested in how these cases get solved, consider following organizations like the Vidok Society or the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System. They're doing important work. And if this kind of case analysis interests you, hit subscribe. We cover investigations like this regularly: the evidence, the methodology, the people behind the breakthroughs. The Gilgo Beach case reminds us that serial killers don't always look like what we expect. They're not obvious. They blend in. They have jobs, families, routines. That's what makes them dangerous. Heuermann operated for more than 30 years. He raised children. He attended school events. He probably passed some of his victims' families on the street without them ever knowing. The investigation into Gilgo Beach continues. Some remains found along Ocean Parkway haven't been attributed to Heuermann. Investigators believe there may be more victims and possibly more killers. Shannon Gilbert, the woman whose disappearance started the search, was never definitively linked to Heuermann. Her case remains a painful open question for her family. What the Gilgo Beach case ultimately shows us is that time doesn't erase evidence, it preserves it. A hair on burlap, a discarded pizza crust, digital footprints that never fade. For more than a decade, a killer thought he'd gotten away with it. He hadn't. The evidence was waiting. The technology was catching up. And eventually, it found him. 8 women, 30 years. And finally, a confession. That's the Gilgo Beach case. I'm your host for Case Files Explained. Until next time.